What's up, Sasquatch fans and athletes? Al from Michelin CrossFit and Hybrid Theory Athletics. Today we're going to be going over some basic movement standards for your kettlebell swing. So the first thing that we want to understand is the kettlebell swing is going to be a ballistic or a dynamic posterior chain movement. It's going to be a big dynamic hip hinge. So when we're talking about a hip hinge, we want to make sure that we understand the difference between a hip hinge and a squat. So a hinge is going to be maximum hip and minimum knee. And a squat is going to be the opposite. It's going to be maximum knee and minimum hip. And it's very, very important that we understand that a kettlebell swing is a hinging movement, not a squatting movement. So that being said, as I get into that hinge, I want to make sure that my upper body is planked or braced as tight as I can. When I get into that starting position, I'm going to hinge those hips, keep that kettlebell out in front of me, push my hips back, trying to keep my shins as perpendicular as possible. I want to make sure that when I set up, my shoulders are higher than my hips are higher than my knees, and again, we're still having that planked or braced core. When I go to initiate that kettlebell, I'm going to snap it between my legs, and my forearms are just going to kiss in between my thighs. I'm going to shoot that posterior chain explosively as I can forward, driving those hips, and that's going to launch that kettlebell, kind of like a pendulum attached to my shoulder. So I'm going to do a couple for you guys. So again, big hip hinge, trying to keep my shins as vertical as I can, start that kettlebell out in front of me, big deep breath, snap, push. And the kettlebell is going to have a rhythm. As the kettlebell goes into my body, I'm going to breathe in. As the kettlebell goes out away from my body, or I snap that posterior chain, I'm going to breathe out. And I'll have that cyclic or rhythmic breathing as I'm going through. As you guys get better, you can start working on pulling that eccentric motion or snapping that kettlebell back into our hips. Some things that we want to pay attention to so that we're not falling into faults commonly seen doing your kettlebell swings are A, too much squat, right? So I'm squatting instead of hinging my kettlebell. Another thing is a rounded back, so kind of upper back, shoulders pulled because I'm trying to reach deeper into between my legs. If I have that rounded back when I go to the top and I finish my kettlebell swing, or I raise and hyperextend that kettlebell swing, I'm gonna have a lot of spinal flexion. So flexion and extension inside that spine is gonna create those lumbar erectors to start pumping up. So if you guys have lower back pain when you're doing your kettlebell swings, you should try and pay attention to keeping that braced core in that planked position as much as we can. And then lastly, one that we see very often is a kettlebell scoop or scooping. And that happens when you have too much knee slide and a lackadaisical hip hinge. So as that kettlebell comes into my body, I kind of go heel toe. And we want to stay away from this because we're not controlling that posterior chain, that big, giant, explosive movement. We want to make sure that the primary focus of your kettlebell swing is not necessarily your kettlebell height, but a big posterior chain movement, big, giant hip hinge, being as explosive as possible. That should be it for the kettlebell swing today, guys. If you guys have any questions, make sure you shoot us a comment, a link, an email. Get us on Instagram, Facebook, @info@hybridtheoryathletics or Michelin CrossFit. Thanks, guys.